Hello, Internet! Welcome to Discover RPG, where we take your questions about RPGs and D&D, substitute them with our own, and do our damnedest despite all forces in the universe and our own psyches to stay on topic. I am one of your hosts, Angela, and with me, sadly Logan cannot be with us today, but a very soothing salve over that wound is the fact that we have the delightful Jason Cutrone here with us again.
Hello! Very good to be here once more. Always glad to be on Discover RPG.
We're happy to have you. And since the fact that I'm the one running the stream today, could I get a little bit of confirmation from chat that you can in fact hear us decently? I just want to make sure I'm not completely messing this up. But thank you very much for your participation, chat. I very much appreciate it. Hooray! It is a success!
Success! Marvelous.
As is often the case with Logan, I will go look at chat. I see Secondhand Samurai, welcome. I see Matthew Siebert and our beloved Jay from Countless Heroes. Thank you guys for joining us. And anyone else who was watching, you're wonderful. Thank you. All right, so my brain is not in witty banter mode or playful banter. How are you doing today, Jason? As if I hadn't just talked to you.
Perfectly fine, perfectly stressful sort of day. Can't really complain since it's been one of those sort of busy but not entirely too swamp-like in terms of time commitments and all that. So, yeah, it's been a pretty fun time.
That's good.
Jovial and lively. How about yourself, as if we had not talked earlier?
It is currently not a swamp outside, which is shocking. My face did not melt like a Nazi in Indiana Jones.
Oh, wow.
So that was good. I took my dog for a walk, which is why I know about the weather today. So
I was outside.
It was a strange place. The air moved. It was very odd. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. And we'll just thank you again for joining us, because we really appreciate it. We know it was super last minute, but we had such a good time talking to you last time that I was really looking forward to chatting about even more stuff, to the point where Logan is jealous about our session plan for today. He wanted to talk about half this stuff so bad.
That's a very good point. Well, and even though it's last minute, I often find that whenever you fly by the seat of your pants, that's when some of the most visceral and wonderful magic occurs. So happy to be invited aboard once more. And so happy to have this wonderful little agenda sort of hashed out in front of us. Shall we go ahead and tell the people what exactly we'll be talking about? Or?
Sure. So let's go down the list of our session plan for today.
Absolutely.
Coming up after our delightful, playful banter, as you can see, is PC Sing-Along. Now, this is going to be an overview of something that I habitually do, which is using outside media when you're doing your character creations, whether that's music playlists or Pinterest boards or any sort of thing to get the juices flowing when you're trying to come up with your character concepts. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to sharing about that. Then we have I Know a Guy, which is a house rule that I had vaguely heard about, but Jason swears by, so we're going to talk about that house rule. Blink Once for Yes is going to be a discussion about Thieves Cant, which sometimes doesn't get utilized in ways that I've realized you can utilize it in game. Mm-hmm. Then we have Body Snatchers, which was honestly the first subject I came up with for this week. It came from a tweet that I will have to go find. But it was about the morality of necromancy, specifically the raising of zombies elements of necromancy, not the resurrection stuff. And whether or not that stuff is overtly evil, and more to the point, how can you make a necromancer, or how can you deal with necromancy in your world or characters in such a way that doesn't set off those sort of red flags of this is a slightly evil act. So how can you finagle that?
That doesn't immediately communicate to the audience, hello, this is a necromancer. He is evil. Must go, must leave.
Right. You how can you make a necromancer that's not trying to be a lich, is my question.
It's an answer that we will hopefully have by the end of stream.
We'll at least ruminate on it. I don't know. All right, sure. Then we have Taming of the Brew. Our Taming of the Brew segment this week is going to be on a homebrew race that we found on DM's Guild called the Lightborn. We're gonna take a look at the formatting of it. We're gonna take a look at what its implications are. I'm excited. It's an interesting concept. Then we have Tools of the Trade, which is going to be where I ask Jason what kind of stuff he uses when he's DMing and given some advice on some of the, let's say, programs or mnemonic devices or any sort of things that you use to help that you think a starting DM might benefit from. And then finally, What Year Is It? Which was a terrible Robin Williams Jumanji impression. We're going to talk about calendars and timekeeping within your campaign setting. I guess we could talk a little bit about out-of-game timekeeping, but mostly world-building elements of how does time pass in your world? How do you track the seasons and the months? And do you even need to? That sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah. It's a very interesting thing, especially esoteric for some world builders who just sort of think that, it takes place during a spring or fall season that's analogous to Earth's. It's very interesting, and I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of good discussions to be had.
Heck yeah! All right. Honestly, I'm excited just to get down to brass tacks and talk about stuff.
Let's go.
All right. So, topic number 1: PC sing-along. What are your habits when you create characters? What sort of media projects do you tend to do when you're prepping a character concept?
Sure. Well, one of the primary things that I find to be most useful, just generally in terms of character creation or NPC generation, whatever you want, whatever your creative endeavor is to find real world media that inspires my view of a character. It's basically one of the baselines that I sort of go to, and for myself, or my own portion of it, I usually troll through my music library. I've got like gigabytes upon gigabytes of information just sitting on CDs on my hard drive at any point in time. And with the wealth of access to music, I find that there is something esoteric that I might have heard like once or twice that fits with this character perfectly. I might be having a song that's just stuck in my head on repeat, and so I introduce it into a character that I think fits. That's one of the main portions of really divining what you're planning to role play. I think, because it's not only having the sheet in front of you, having their backstory listed out. It's tying that to a lyric or tying that to a motif within a song that just sticks in your head as something that's so right. And in relation to that, I sort of allow the music not to take over the character, but to inform, like, if I were to sit down and sort of analyze their attitudes or whatnot, like almost acting as a psychological profile of sorts, like the lyrics being emblematic of either their personality or their history or some portion of it. Like I find it to be a supremely useful and wonderful tool. Although I will say I do have little experience in the generation and, shall we say, a procurement of Pinterest boards, something that, far as I can tell with your experiences, you have a little bit more of a little bit more exposure to.
Yeah. By the way, you're speaking my language in terms of the music playlists. I literally I love playing my character playlists for my husband, Andy. And he often, like, I'll describe a character to him, and then a song will come on, and he'll be like, how the hell did you find a song that exactly fits this character? And I sometimes remind him of my secret, which is not that I found a perfect song. It's that I found a song that had a thread line that I really liked. And then I continued listening to the song and then found a detail in it that I also thought really fit what my idea of the character was.
Mhm.
So my playlists half the time are half seeking out thematic connections and parallels, and half I like the sound of this song. I'm going to listen to it and think if this feels like it could be something that reflects the character. So
Right.
like my characters will get developed half because of the songs that I've chosen, not necessarily the other way around. I found a couple of really neat ones and have discovered a lot of really interesting interpersonal background stuff about characters by listening to songs that I was like, oh, well, that title makes sense. Well, let's listen to the track. Oh, that's a cool idea. I should have them have a broken heart because of this really elaborate thing that happened. And
I should hurt this character because this song is cool.
well, I found a song about making a deal with the devil, and Jason will find that fun for reasons that will become apparent down the road. And it had to do with like not just thinking you one-upped the devil on your deal, like, oh, I got out of this. Like, you should see the other guy. I got a real good deal on this.
I'm good.
But also this idea of like wanting people to love you, like doing whatever you can to make people love you. I'm like, that's like heartbreaking, but I love it and I'm stealing it.
Yeah.
So I really, music is like my number one in like insight into my characters, and just because I like making playlists anyway.
Right. So, well, and I suppose reverting back to the playlist discussion for a little bit before touching on like Pinterest and all that.
Yeah.
One of the main things that I love about creating and generating these playlists is that you can use damn near anything so long as it harkens back to the character. Now, I should caution and say, don't disrespect or don't appropriate the origins of the music that you're listening to. I find that especially when trying to incorporate songs and genres that lie outside of my experience, be it music put out by queer punk bands or hip hop artists or even rock groups from like sub-Saharan Africa. As soon as you venture into a particular direction, don't be afraid to dive into the artist as well. Like, don't be afraid to investigate what a song is actually trying to communicate or what they are actually speaking to in any particular issue. Because I find that the more information that you garner, the more informed your decision can be, and the more close that sort of totemic symbol can become for the character. Because it's not only that, oh, this song sounds cool and I'm going to use it. It's that the lyrics, the issues that are being spoken to, the message that is being communicated, that falls in line with my character. And that's something that I can use to either get into the role a little bit more comfortably, or at least something that I can hold on to as sort of a personal assessment or a personal sort of totem, for want of a better word.
Yeah. When you talk about the idea of appropriating, are you specifically talking about like taking a detail or taking a piece of music and then just saying in game, like, oh, they play this Japanese instrument or whatever? Is that what you mean? Or what are you cautioning against?
I'm cautioning against, especially when exploring music that's that you're not familiar with. Don't feel like your go-to has to be, oh, I like this song because it sounds pretty and I won't investigate further. Like the literal act of just taking something from a culture or taking something from a subgenre and just ripping it out wholesale and paying attention to the aesthetics of it rather than the substance. You can have both. And I find more often than not, when you pay attention to the substance of a particular piece, you find even more connections that are formed, like almost immediately. One of the playlists that I'm most proud of, personally, was a playlist that I generated for Strad von Sarovic for a one-shot that I did, a one-on-one shot where it was literally me and my friend Susanna Grace, friend of the channel, friend of myself, and all that good stuff.
Friend of friends.
Friend of friends. Where we actually went through his history and sort of saw how he became this person in Barovia. And and within that, I took a lot from spirituals, in particular what is it? In the choir tradition, there was a song called Gonna Build a Castle. It was put out specifically for Far Cry 5, I believe it was.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and there was also another portion of it, which was the old hymnal, Will the Circle Be Unbroken, which, if you remember, was featured quite heavily in Bioshock Infinite. And I actually had the choral arrangement from that game sort of in the playlist as a sort of totem pole of like, I'm in this cyclical nature. I was forced here by powers beyond my understanding. Like, will this ever stop? That sort of questioning. That was sort of emblematic of an internal struggle. And I didn't know much about the song before I actually, ripped it from the game. But as I started investigating and looking into the lyrics, understanding what the message was behind that, I grew to have a greater appreciation towards that song specifically and to its impact on Strahd's character, or how I interpreted Strahd's character as a whole. So whenever you find something that on the surface seems like, oh, that's a shoo-in, I'll include it, don't stop there. Be inquisitive and sort of investigate further, like, the message that's being relayed. And yeah, just always be curious enough to try and further your own understanding.
Sure. Yeah. No, I approve of that. One of the things that I'd recently, or I guess in the last year or so, had come up with is I was going to be playing a Furbolg, and I wanted to flesh out their culture a little bit. She was from a grasslands tribe of Furbolg, and I found I guess while looking for a tone that I thought captured that, I found, and I like Mongolian or Tuvan throat singing. I enjoy that, but I found an instrument that they use called a tsur, a Tsuur, which is like a very thin flute that they almost do the same thing, where it's two-toned. There's a bass and a melody, and it just really fit this. I mean, maybe it's just context that. It sounded nomadic. I'm like, probably because it's just where the culture's from.
Yeah,
but playing with the idea that in the Furbolg culture that we were developing with my DM, it was they had sort of equal parts afoot in the Fey realm, in the arcane, and then in the natural world. And so this idea of having a two-toned quality to their music played into the idea that they felt very of two worlds to begin with.
Right.
So I was able to build into the meaning of why they were using those sort of instruments.
Exactly. And if you just went with the aesthetics of it, if you never thought, oh, well, there's this two-tone thing, you would have lost on a wealth of information that you could then sort of draw upon as inspiration. So that's basically what I always advise whenever it comes to generating a playlist. Don't be afraid to be curious. Sure, like, the full sentence is curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. So if you can, like, don't be afraid. Like, ignorance is one of the worst things, especially when it comes to music.
Just, I love talking to you. I didn't know that at all.
But
it's filed away now.
Yes, good to have that on tap, just in case. Little quick reminder, you like talking to me. Haha.
Well, now I just want to, whenever I want to impress somebody or make someone think hard, I just want to take a normal idiom and add a second part to it to be like, well, the whole thing actually is this.
The whole
cater
thing
to your
actually
point.
is I've also got another one. What is it? The blood of brothers. Blood is thicker than water is the sort of thing. But the thing was, the blood of brothers is thicker than the water of the womb. Basically, that
it means the opposite of what a lot of people think it means.
Basically, that instead of blood ties being family, that's the ultimate commitment that one can make. That it's actually something entirely different. Weren't we supposed to talk about Pinterest boards at some point?
Well, we were talking about music. That's fine.
We were talking about music. That was it.
Yeah. So music can be an incredibly... what's great is if you want to use media to inspire, I mean, as an artist, as someone who's trying very hard to respect artists, it's very important to not just paste things all over the place without giving credit or asking permission if you want to post things publicly. But what we're talking about for the most part right now is private inspiration, things that you want to collect so that you get a vibe for your character, or you want to share it among your DM or among your party privately. Mm-hmm. Pinterest is an odd duck when it comes to that sort of issue, because a lot of Pinterest runs that risk of, it just copied stuff from another web page, and it's challenging dealing with and I'm sure a lot of artists just hate Pinterest because of kind of how easy it is to strip credit and links. You can just upload whatever you want. But from an organizational standpoint, I find Pinterest invaluable, not only because it helps you sort things in categories in a very visual way, but also it's like a freakishly good D&D resource. When you're searching for images, it's really good at it. You can find a bunch of shit, and because it's all a lot of it is optical search engine. It's looking for similar images or similar... It's collected enough information about the metadata or what it even looks like, and you can find you can go down a rabbit hole in Pinterest looking for stuff when we were developing the Goa for the Countless Heroes stream. We were developing the Goa as a race. I have a Goa Pinterest board that is so many. It's Warforged and classic Greek statues and modern art, and it's full of a ton of some of it's just aesthetic stuff, some of it is here's the mood I would want to go to have, or here's some patterns I think are really neat for the carving techniques, all sorts of stuff. It is a nice way of compiling visual cues for coming up with a character concept or any sort of world building detail. I also use Pinterest when I'm commissioning pictures. Because I notate the crap out of the details. I only really want the hat in this picture. Or just the expression on this person's face is what I'm trying to capture, or that sort of thing, where you'd be a little more detailed.
Being able to collect as much resources, especially when it comes to references. I have a motto of over preparation is underrated. So whenever it comes to especially commissioning artists or otherwise just trying to relay the visual ideas behind a character, the more the merrier. Do not be afraid to absorb every bit of information that you can. And especially when it comes to your point of publicly posting these things, never do so without credit. That's the biggest thing that I think some artists, even little to no exaggeration, live or die by. Being able to take that extra step to give even recognition to artists is monumental. And if you're able to commission them and have references collected for such an occasion, again, the more that you help them along, the more adherent to your vision or to your impression of the character they can be. And obviously, especially in communication between artist and patron, there's always going to be a little creative license that's taken. And more often than not, I find that the most exciting bit, because they might find or latch onto a particular thing that I had not even considered. And having that sort of process of discovering the character with somebody else, it brings it to life in a certain sense. When it comes to personal inspiration, don't be afraid to as with the music, investigate your sources to fully understand where the art came from or how the art came about. Because the more information you have, again, the better off you're going to be. You can communicate to other players, hey, this is what my character sort of usually wears, or even in setting the scene, you can say that, oh, my character sort of rustles their coat, which looks like this, or whatnot. So
yeah.
There's
a lot of my graphic design experience comes from a history of photoshopping. And I make concept art all the time that I know I'm never going to actually share online, because it's, 15 people's work that I've photoshopped together. And that's something that I do privately. I know that that's a touchy subject for artists.
Absolutely.
Touching their work without permission, but in the case of what I'm doing, it's purely for personal use, and I'm never sharing it without permission.
Right.
So it's a slippery slope. I'm trying to get better about it because I'm getting more into the professional sphere, but it doesn't mean I don't go, oh, I can just I can fix that.
Yeah.
When you have Photoshop magic, it's hard sometimes. Which is why I highly recommend, if you're going to make your own stuff, use free use imaging. Pixabay and Unsplash and Pexler, I think, is one of them. Just get free public sourced images and then go to town. Whatever. You can Photoshop the crap out of those. Just be mindful.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that sort of curiosity in this sense can really aid you in developing not only the character, but the details that sometimes are lost in the middle of role-playing any particular session. So, yeah, I think I cannot stress enough how wonderful and how powerful I think these tools can be. And even if you've never assembled a Pinterest board or an inspiration board for a character, even if you've never really thought about giving a playlist a try, just listen to songs that you think your character would listen to at any point in time. Just add them to a list and just keep that list on hand. And pretty soon you'll find that you have something pretty beautiful.
Agreed.
Is there
any other media that you've seen people use? Music, images?
Music, images. I've seen a few people use certain mimetic things, just silly pictures that they think describe the character or what they think at any point in time. So, yeah, when it comes to the types of media that are appropriate, there's really no type that is. Everything's fair game. If you think that there's a piece of music out there that your character would like, or if you think there's a picture of a picture that perfectly, describes them in a certain situation or wearing a certain thing, I find no reason not to incorporate that, because it's just further. It's being kind to yourself as a player. You're just garnering these things so that you can utilize them, hopefully.
Yeah.
So,
and as I'm always the hedging bets person, there's also no rule that says you have to do these things. We just both find them very inspiring and interesting to do.
Absolutely. This is one of the most optional things in the universe, especially when it comes to role-playing. So you don't have to use it, but I would recommend at least giving it a shot.
Sure. That also plays a little bit into the media that I sometimes use is character impressions, where it's like, I had a character who basically sounded like Blanche Devereaux from Golden Girls in personality and voice.
It works. It works. Yeah. It works. Well, it works.
You're never going to do them perfectly, so it just sounds like you're coming up with something interesting. Like it's through the lens of you, rather than a straight up impersonation.
Exactly. All right.
Okay, so let's talk about a house rule.
Yes, very interesting.
I know a guy, so let me set a scene then. You got your party's walking around trying to find information in a town that very few of them have been to, and all of a sudden the rogue is like, whoa, guys, well, you don't have to ask everybody. I know a guy. Now, that player might not actually know a guy, but he said that, so why would he say that, Jason?
Because he knows a guy, or they know a guy. Because, for all intents and purposes, this house rule introduces a little bit more interaction concerning the player characters and the DM, the narrator, what have you. It was established, or at least first voiced, as far as I can tell, by a man by the name of David Nett, writer of Starter Kit over on Geek and Sundry, and just all around pretty primo guy, as far as I can tell. And it was inspired by the sort of trick that certain screenwriters, most notably Larry Kasdan, take whenever they want to introduce a character that may or may not help the action progress as expected. The example that was given was Han Solo deciding to go to Lando Calrissian in The Empire Strikes Back, even though Han wasn't 100% sure how he would actually be received. So, in any situation, this is reading directly from the Twitter chain that was published about, literally almost a year ago now. In any situation where it makes sense, a player character can declare, I know a guy. And they quickly sketch that NPC and the relationship that they have. Fewer details are usually advised, as they leave room for the DM and the PC to sort of play around. Upon declaration, that NPC now exists. Then, when the player characters try to interact with that NPC, the player who created that NPC will make a charisma roll to see how the NPC reacts. Depending upon the situation, the DM may decide disadvantage or advantage applying in that certain circumstance. This is a very simple, very loose mechanic that basically invites players to create critical NPCs and continue developing their own backstories as they play. He signs off with, now it belongs to the world, if you want to try it. So, taking a look at it, I was supremely impressed with the sort of elegance that was engendered just by virtue of this sort of storytelling device that's taken advantage of so often in media like television or film, but I've rarely really seen in tabletop role-playing game communities, mainly because it requires sort of a script to be constructed around it. Obviously, improvisation adds a layer of sophistication and sort of complication that obviously is not present in other media. But with this, I think it's both simple enough and elegantly written enough to have an interaction that goes beyond the conventional 5e sort of, 5e establishment of this is the town healer, this is the town guard, like these are the town influencers, and this is your relationship to them, go forth.
Goddamn social influencers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't say that word very well.
That didn't. Yes, we'll get to Thieves Cant in a minute. Don't worry.
Yeah. I love this idea, and also, might I add, Logan freaked out how he's like, this. Even the name of this is exciting. I want this. But yeah, I really, really enjoy this. It reminds me a little, and my other frame of reference for RPGs is the Fate system. It reminds me a lot of aspects, but like on the fly aspects, which I really like.
Right.
That it mechanizes that collaborative spirit that I really like between DM and player, but it gives them a mechanic to alert the DM that they want to start engaging in collaboration.
Right. And not only that they want to engage in collaboration, but they want to introduce another tool for the DM to use. Like, especially when it comes to, character relationships, there's a lot of thought that can go into it, to where a player character literally has like almost every person in their entire backstory, family, friends, associates, like down to the letter. And there are others who prefer a more loose leaf method where they have the basic skeleton of their backstory hashed out, and then the rest can be filled in. This system allows for either of those characters to have a direct impact and a direct influence that's relevant to their backstory on the story. So what I also really appreciate about this rule itself is that it allows for things to go wrong. Like that, even a simple charisma check to see how much this person really likes you. Like it's very much something that I think can be utilized and slotted into any game that you're sort of running. Like it's versatile, and it can even be dressed up or dressed down if you really just want it to be, the player telling the DM, hey, this is the NPC that I know, and he's sort of like this. Then the DM can say, okay, you get a hold of them, and shenanigans ensue. Or you can dress it up and say, well, you need to find them first of all, so go ahead and make an investigation check, and then go from there. Oh, you're sort of talking to them, but they remember XYZ. Make a history check to make sure that you remember the same thing. Or, like, just basically go buck wild with however many skill checks you think would be enough to give life to this new character. I think out of many of the home rules that I know of, and that I sometimes incorporate within my games, this is definitely one of the ones that I will, depending upon the tone of the game, be more than willing to accept. Because obviously, we can't all have, I know a guy in every single town,
sure,
cropping up.
The DM would obviously have a bit of adjudication on that.
Yes,
like, I have veto power. You don't. Someone's like, I know a guy. You really don't.
Yeah, not in this case. I'm so sorry. But even with that, like, even though there is a little bit of concern that's thrown to balance and whatnot, it's not like the rule itself is too obtuse or too complex to deconstruct and then reassemble. Like, it's literally, you say you know a guy, talk with the DM a little bit, talk about your history with this person, and then when you see them, make a charisma check. And then we'll see if they actually like you or not.
Yeah.
So I think that out of all of the home rules that I've especially read within recent months, this is the one I've been most keen to introduce and most happy to see sort of embraced, because I think that storytelling in RPGs can benefit from the sort of screenwriter tricks where, this sudden person that was never mentioned before can become an integral part and an integral portion of the story, even if they're never seen afterwards or what have you. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just a big fan. I plan on using it too when next time I run a big campaign.
Sometimes on this show we just like to talk about things that we like.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the premise of the show.
Yeah.
I put a link to the house rule, the Twitter thread in the chat, so you guys can take a look. It'll also be in the video description if you're watching this after the fact.
Yes.
All right.
Also, hi YouTube.
Yes, hi YouTube. All right, so let's talk about Thieves Cant.
Ooh, yes.
So I always had a fondness for the concept of Thieves Cant. For the uninitiated, it is I would call it less a language and more a system of coding and obfuscating the text. Rather, the text of what you're saying is obfuscating the subtext of what you're trying to convey to somebody else who's in the know of the criminal community. I've found ways of referencing it almost as a combination of written and oral traditions that allow you to communicate with other thieves in the region that you're in.
Right. For me, my relationship with the language as it stands has really been mainly to have it as a write-off more often than not, unfortunately. It's sort of this mishmash of this loose patois collection of like Draconic or Dwarven or Elvish, depending upon the region that this action is taking place in. And it's a mixture of words from those languages that to the outside observer doesn't make much sense. It just sounds like you're talking nonsense. But to whoever they're communicating with, the message is received. It's akin. I've also seen in other games that it's akin to Cockney rhyming slang or some of these. Yeah,
I've seen like hobo code. I've seen that sometimes, like marking places that are safe to ask for help, marking places that you want to stay away from. They don't trust people that are more transient.
Right.
I've seen that before. I had a renewed enthusiasm for Thieves Cant after watching a video by Dale Kingsmill, who has a channel called Monarchs Factory, which, by the way, Monarchs Factory is a great channel name when your last name is Kingsmill. I loved what she did there. It was really good. So here, I'm going to put the link. Please don't watch it now. Please stay with us, but you can go watch it later.
Yes, absolutely. Catch up like everyone else and stay tuned.
So I put it in chat. So it's a video about Thieves Cant, and Dael, she ruminates a little bit on how to incorporate Thieves Cant as a more active activity in your game. It made Thieves Cant make sense in a way that I have never really gotten before. So I really appreciate her take on it. And this might have been partly borrowed from, she talks a little bit about Cockney rhyming scheme, but the two examples that she had, and I've actually stolen one of them for my audio drama, Threads in the Veil, which I'm still working on, I promise.
It's gonna happen, don't worry.
I looked at the pilot came out a year ago. I was like, oh god.
It'll happen, don't worry.
But anyway, I'm stealing it for that. The idea of a coded language for the example of a criminal trying to get a job from an employer, and say they meet at a tavern and there's a way to speak to somebody. There'd be an initiation statement that you would say to somebody to sort of like, are you on the same wavelength as me? But then she gave this example of talking as if you know the person. Like, oh, it's been really great to see you. It's been, how long has it been? And the number of months or number of years they say indicates like how many people I need for the job. And, oh, how's your cousin, or like, how's your nephew doing? Or how many kids you have now? I was like, oh yeah, I have 4 kids. Like, I want 400 gold for whatever you're doing for me. No, I swear it was 5. Are you sure it wasn't 5? Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was just 4. It's fine. But like this really interesting way of having a conversation in front of somebody and having it be so innocuous, but what you're saying, because you've done that trigger word, that phrase, that hinted, okay, we're having this conversation now because we're really in public and we need to talk about a job.
Yeah.
But this idea of, oh, well, you should come over to our house. We'll get you drinks. We'll get you well fed. You should come over. And if they say yes, that means, okay, we're going to meet at a second location to actually talk plainly about what the details are. But this idea of just completely obfuscating what you're saying and in a way that's not inaccessible for a DM to do. You could just decide these are the rules.
Yeah.
Or you can work with a player who's a rogue and say, these are the rules of initiating a thing with somebody. Or you
conversation.
Could talk, and you could do it in a more meta way and say, all right, as a rogue, this is how your conversation with this guy's going to go. What do you want to try to convey to them? And the rogue tells you, well, I want to see if there's a job available. I want to know how much money it is. I want to know what kind of job it is. And then you talk them through what your conversation was like. You say, okay, well, when you talk to this guy, you chat about how the family's doing, and you could explain how it goes. Cause I mean, a savvy player might pick up on that and ask for those rules so they could do it themselves next time.
Right. Yeah.
So I really love that way of interacting with it.
Yeah. And I will say, to that point, that actually introduces a very interesting element where it becomes sort of like a dictionary that you keep as a reference, like the sort of translator's guide to Thieves Cant, which, not that it doesn't exist, obviously there are real life analogs, but that in order to sort of make it even more real, to have it be a part of a comprehensive whole, like that sort of concept would have never occurred to me, to be perfectly honest, because to my mind, it's all about the secrecy and doublespeak and like, even though you're talking gibberish to people who are outside of it, you'd have to rely on the idea that these people, like all rogues, understood all languages to a certain degree, or at least had assimilated enough to get them by, which can make it pretty easy to spot if you've got two people, Well,
that idea of making it less about incomprehensible and making it just innocuous. Yes. That you don't know it's happening. That's the real trick. It's not necessarily being able to hide what you're saying. It's about someone doesn't even realize they need to be paying attention.
Yeah, being able to convey to a particular person at any point in time, hey, by the way, I want to do illegal things. Without actually just holding up a bag of gold and saying, I want to do illegal things.
And you have somebody who wants to hire for a job, or you have somebody that, they know this bar is where you hang out, and that's where the criminals come to look for jobs, and you can just hang out there until somebody initiates contact. And just that little bit of insight for how that works was so interesting to me. And I'm really thank you, Matthew. Hello, sir. I would like to do a crime, please.
Yeah, pretty much. But imagine each word in like Infernal, Draconic, and then switching back to Dwarvish and Elvish for the last bit, using Gnomish sentence structure. Like that's but incorporating the idea of switching languages would also make sense if you were dealing with different factions. If you like discussed with some and we've talked about this a little bit, and we're going to do a video on the idea of common as a pidgin language. You speak to someone in common just to initiate the official the contact. You're like, I want a job. But then if you switch to something else, if you switch to Gnomish, all of a sudden, oh, okay, so this is a heist that we're talking about. Or you switch to Draconic, it's like, all right, well, oh, okay, this is a beating somebody up for money. This is a loan shark sort of job. Right.
I like that idea. That's an added layer you could give to it, where it's the language suddenly dictates. It's still innocuous because you switch to that language, and if someone speaks it, they're still hearing you talk about your kids or talk about like what you had for lunch yesterday.
Right.
But it's
talking about the weather, or
but the context has changed.
Yeah.
So that's always an option.
Yeah, and I think even in the simplest of interactions, like one of the most powerful scenes that I remember from a heist movie specifically was in Ocean's 11. I think it was Danny Ocean just getting out of prison, sitting down at a poker table, then seeing that a friend of his, a former associate, was a dealer. And as soon as he came to the table, he said, "Hi, Frank." And the conversation just sort of stops and says, "Sir, my name's Bernard. Don't know who you're talking about. You must be mistaking me for someone." And being able to have even that moment of like, okay, you want something done. Let's see if I can help you. Let's see if we can help each other. Like that provides a good moment of tension. That it provides a sort of dramatic engine by which simple arrangements like, hey, I need a bodyguard to stand in this alley at this specific time, or hey, I need a lookout for a heist that I'm planning. Suddenly that becomes something of an interaction that just goes beyond dice rolling, which as a baseline, I think the further you can incorporate elements that lie outside of, rolling a d20 and seeing how it goes, I think, especially in terms of drama, especially in terms of role-playing opportunity, there will be more versatility injected. So
yeah, so the second example that Dial gave in the Monarchs Factory video was so cool. Yep. I need to do it someday. Okay, so the idea is it is a way of packaging exposition for the characters. You have the party comes to a new city or a new town and wants to get the lay of the land. They want to understand where they can go to get jobs. They want to know what's going to be safe to do. Who do they need to avoid? All sorts of things like that. So they seek out a person. The idea of there being a non-verbal cue for what kind of work you'll take. What kind of criminal work do you deal in? So this idea of rings and bars, wearing things that have bars or different shapes and different numbers in different counts. If you have 2 bars on your lapel or you wear 2 bars somewhere on your body, that means you're a person that can be accessed for information. So you're looking around and you say, okay, well, you see this guy over here that's dealing cards and he's got a pair of bars across he's got 2 chokers on his neck. So you see 2 bars and you know this guy is a guy you would go for information. So you use your little opening line and you talk to him. So you have some sort of like in the know question initiating statement, you would say.
Yeah.
And then you'd start a conversation. And again, it's this veiled conversation with a guy. And the example she gives is dealing cards. So this person's doing card tricks. And you go in and you bet a little money. You go down and you bet a little money and you play the card game with them. And depending on the outcome of the game, they'll be like, oh, do you want to play again? And if they prompt you for that and you pay them a little bit more, then you've initiated, you're paying them for information about the city. And you're saying, hey, well, I'm new in town. What sort of things can you tell me about? And as the person's dealing, and you can pull real cards out if you want, but as the person's dealing, they're describing things around the city. Oh, well, the Chapel Moors down the way, that family, they run the brewery over there. And then they put down a spade. And when they put down a spade, they're dangerous. Stay away from them. And then they start describing other things, and you see, oh, well, it's a Queen of Hearts. That's the place that you can go when you need to have a little bit of a respite. You can go there and ask. Like, they're in the know. They will give you a haven. And
right.
and you point around, and as they're just continuing to give you cards, like they're dealing it out, but they're dealing very specifically. And when they put a specific thing down, they might talk about it.
Right.
And so to pay attention to what's happening. And you could just narrate this, but I have to imagine that would be an incredibly immersive way of giving people information about the world and make the rogue feel like they are so fucking integral to this entire endeavor.
Right.
I feel like so often the rogue feels like, all right, you pick locks and you do a thieves cant. but engaging them in a more social way, even if it's narrating over them and saying, this is the thing you're able to do, and you start doing this, that you empower them to ask more if they want to do that again.
Right.
But then you're also making them feel like they're a part of a community. I think that's something that's often missing with the idea of Thieves Cant and criminal organizations. It's not just mobsters. There's just a everyday criminal and ways of communicating and getting not illicit jobs, but just under the table stuff, because people people might not want to deal with you, or it's easier to work with someone that's on the same wavelength as you. So you get information from them instead of asking, the town tourism board. You ask this guy who clearly knows, where are all the guards hanging out?
Yeah, a little bit more of the, shall we say, illicit information that perhaps the tourist board leaves off the brochure.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's a fabulous way of, and it like I said, it's called, giving them the lay of the land.
Sure.
And Dale does a really, really good job of explaining this stuff in detail. Like, you could just write, I think she wrote down her rules. I think you can find her rules in the description for the video. But it's really cool as a reference, where that would be and then again, you get an NPC out of that. You suddenly have your lay of the land guy. You need to find more information. That's your person.
Yeah. And in addition to that, there are a couple of points that I just sort of brewed up here. For one, you can have the rogue get it wrong, like, really badly. Like, if you said the example of the two chokers representing two bars across the person's personal accoutrement, but you could have them just completely misinterpret something based off of an intelligence check, based off of some sort of
well, one good reason to do that would be, say they're in a different country. Like, you're in a completely different social environment, the symbols could be different. So it's like, make an intelligence check of if you think that this is what you think this is, and if they roll well, you give them the correct interpretation. You say something like, well, you notice the way he's doing stuff. He's got some things in his bag that you recognize as, okay, that's a person that, gets, that's offense. That's clearly offense. You can tell. Right. Because you pick up on the nonverbal cues because of how much of an expert you are.
Or it could be the type of card that they use, or it could be embedded in some portion of the character that many people just write off. There are many variable ways to sort of introduce Thieves Cant beyond, like, as you said, doing a Thieves Cant and asking to do crimes. Yeah. My one sort of point, especially in the incorporation of a rule such as this, would be communication.
Yes, and meta discussion can often help, especially with the first time you do it.
Yes.
As opposed to leaving them like, I don't know what's happening.
Yes.
It's like, no, well, the rogue does know what's happening. I'm going to talk you through it because you understand what's going on here. Right.
And even if it's like, even if it is something that, like, the DM is supremely for, if the player doesn't feel it, that's fine as well. There is no onus on anybody involved to suddenly adopt these systems just because they exist. Like, honestly, when it comes to levels of comfort, I would rather the player be comfortable than even to introduce these sort of interesting elements, because a lot of these can be sort of hand waved away and said that, okay, you're looking for this person, you go to them into the bar, that you have this discussion. In Thieves Cant, XYZ.
Yeah, it's about reading the table, understanding what world building, what level of detail your players either have the patience for or the interest in.
Yes, because those two things are integral to any game. Like, that cannot be stressed enough.
Every DM has their own personal preferences of what they really love immersing themselves in, and that isn't always compatible with the table they're at. So you got to learn how to curb your impulses if that's not something that the table really cares about. You can see their eyes glazing over. You can hand wave it if you need to.
Balance in all things. That is advisable. Advisable indeed.
All right, so we're at about the hour point, so I'm gonna take a really quick moment to talk about sponsors. It's our cash corner or whatever. We can't call it a money zone.
Was it cash corner with 2 Ks, or was it something like that? Something.
I don't like it. All right, so as you may or may not know, everybody, Discover RPG is a part of, yes, I'll just say ka-ching, and that's where we'll start. So Discover RPG is a member of the Nerdsmith Network. Me and Logan are directors in the network and also proud creators. You can find us at nerdsmith.org. We have Oh gosh, I don't have the numbers memorized, but we have about 20 different shows on the network right now. Anything from podcasting to streaming, such as this, to video content, all sorts of neat stuff. I highly recommend you check it out. Just off the top of my head, we have, let's see, people I've talked to lately. Ellie and Heavenly are two of our creators, and they run a podcast called Monster Crush, where Heavenly, their resident cryptid expert, talks to Ellie, who knows much, much less than Heavenly does about this. And Heavenly pitches going on a date with a particular cryptid, and they go through the ins and outs and the pros and cons of doing so. It is quite delightful. I am a big fan of that show. You should definitely check them out. That's Monster Crush. That's a podcast. And let me see. Tooting my own horn a little bit. We're on I'm also a player on Shenanigans, in which Logan is a DM. It's an actual play, also set in the world of Vale, which is where Countless Heroes takes place. We have been on hiatus for a little while, getting some stuff set up for our second campaign arc. But we will be coming back bigger, better, and unlike you've ever seen. We will be putting some more information out in the future, but we are going to be releasing it as a stream in a couple months. So you'll be able to see our wonderful faces while we play our idiots. It'll be great. So those are a couple shows, but you can find anything else, all the other wonderful creators at nerdsmith.org. You can also consider supporting us by going to Nerdsmith. You can subscribe. That money goes to keeping the lights on here at the network, but also the majority of it goes to our creators to help support them and make this a viable hobby and or career for them. We have some incredibly passionate people that we want to make sure we support. Thank you for subscribing. I saw a couple of subscribers earlier today here on Twitch. Twitch is awesome. Nerdsmith, all those proceeds go directly to our network and our network creators, though. So either of those we're very grateful for. And that's just our network, but we do have a couple of sponsors. Die Hard Dice is a beloved sponsor. They create custom designed metal dice. They're super duper awesome. You can actually, because we love you all so much, we want to make sure that we help you guys as our viewers. If you use at dieharddice.com, you use the promo code DRPG, you will get 15% off your next dice purchase. That's good for one purchase per person. It is pretty fabulous. I am a super duper big fan of their pretty metal dice. It has ruined me for plastic dice because of how nice they are. But they also have some really kick-ass polyhedral dice. The Moonstone kind that they just came out with is all shimmery and purple. It's super duper lovely. And I feel like Logan's watching me very carefully from chat as I'm pitching our sponsors to make sure I don't mess up anything. But I'm going to try my best to just keep going. What else do we have? Yes, please use the promo code DRPG on Die Hard Dice so that people know that you are coming from our show. That is how we show our support for Die Hard, and that they know how much we try very hard to make their support have been well earned. And yeah, so Die Hard's amazing. Go check them out. And last but not least, World Anvil. World Anvil is super duper coupon, I almost said. That's not a phrase. But World Anvil's amazing, and we want to support them as well. You can go to worldanvil.com or check out our Countless Heroes channel I'll put the link in the thing. It is nerdsmith.org/ch World Anvil. That's not the link. I copied the wrong thing. I'm really in good. I'm very put together today, if you haven't noticed.
You're doing fantastically.
There we go. We just have our map of the city of Cinderhaven up with our cool districts layer over it, so you can check out our map on there. There's some really neat stuff that have just been updated. But yeah, we have an event coming up, though. If you are in the Anaheim area during WonderCon this year, Nerdsmith is having their first meetup sponsored by World Anvil. You can check us out on the Facebook event link that I just put in. We'd love to see you. We're going to have a bunch of the creators, almost the entire cast of Countless Heroes, and a bunch of other cool giveaways from Die Hard Dice and World Anvil, and we will have a really good time. So it's, I believe, on the 30th of March. Correct, 30th of March, 8 p.m. at the Anaheim Convention Center. We're actually in the hotel that is the main hotel. But you can check that Facebook link for information about when and where we will be. It's going to be super awesome. And I need to find a new word, not super, but it's a good superlative. Why do I feel just completely out of my depth right now?
It's fine. You're doing great. It's great.
Okay, so to review, nerdsmith.org is the network we're a part of. You can support us directly there at nerdsmith.org/donate. Die Hard Dice is our super kick-ass dice sponsor. You can find cool dice accessories and plastic and metal, most importantly metal dice, using the code DRPG for 15% off your purchase. And World Anvil is our amazing partner in crime, where World Anvil is a world building software where you can keep track of your RPG campaigns or your fiction writing in sort of a wiki setup. And there's a lot of really neat detail and functionality on the website to give you a little bit more depth than just a wiki would.
Heck yeah.
So yes, something about an event, Logan. I did the spiel already. WonderCon event, March 30th, Nerdsmith WonderCon meetup, sponsored by World Anvil and Die Hard Dice, and it's wonderful. Everything's wonderful.
Everything is fine.
End of pitch.
End of pitch. End of catching.
We're diving in and out for Logan, so he's hearing every. Yes, the Hilton. Thank you, Logan. It's at the Hilton.
Oh, the Hilton. The Hilton in Anaheim, California?
Yes.
Ah.
Just go to the Facebook page. It has all the info. I don't remember everything, and I don't want to give the wrong info. All right. So thank you all for listening to my spiel. It seems that you've all stayed, which is great. All right. So let's talk zombies.
Ooh.
Well,
yeah.
not specifically zombies.
Well,
we're talking. Okay, so I do need to find and track down this original tweet. Mea culpa for not actually having it right now. But there was a conversation going on in the Twitter discourse for D&D about the morality of necromancy. And the particular tweet that I had seen involved the idea that the book, the PHB for D&D, seems to express that necromancy or the raising of the dead is specifically defined as evil magic. And I don't know whether it's in the flavor text or there's something mechanical that talks about that being evil.
Right.
But they justified it as, you raise the dead of somebody and like their little kid sees their dead body running around. Like that's traumatic and terrifying. And one could argue an evil thing to do to bring back the dead and use them as fodder or as labor or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is of course based in a morality in our world, and that really is the morality that matters. But the question is, what could you potentially do to offset that that potential moral quandary of having a player wants to play a necromancer? There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but they keep trying to tell you, oh no, I'm a good necromancer. I just raise zombies, but I'm a good guy. But
Right.
if you have this moral hang up with what raising the dead actually means,
Right.
you have potentially a conflict of world building there.
Mhm.
And so the question is, can you do things? I guess we could talk about whether or not you think that zombies are amoral, but besides that, let's say based on the premise that necromancy as it stands in 5e, raising zombies to do your will, is an evil act and could compromise the morality of a character who thinks of themselves as good.
Sure.
What is a potential reflavoring or recontextualization of necromancy that could maybe lean a little less towards evil?
Yeah, that it's a very interesting quandary to sort of meditate upon, and very very pertinent to try and creatively sort of solve, because you do have those sort of characters who say, no, I'm a necromancer, but I'm also okay. Like I'm good. Like I have my zombies pass out lollipops to kids or something. When
but
it
Grandma?
comes...
See? It can so easily twist. Like, are you going to travel across the country with your zombies, or are you going to pick the ones that are fresh and easy to find in the town you're in?
Yeah, it depends. It really depends. But what I think you could do is to have necromancy be a subset of nature or natural magics. The thing is, our cultural conceptions, especially when it comes to the ability to raise the dead, often engender like this sense of this is unnatural, this is not right, this is something that goes against the moral fabric of the universe. Even though it could be argued there is no such thing, but that's another discussion for another day. In particular to this, I think that the best that you could do is to phrase this as an extension of that which is natural. Obviously, it's easy for us, us Westerners, us Americans more specifically, it's easy to view death as like this finality that happens, and there's nothing that we can do to prevent it, unless you subscribe to beliefs in afterlife and whatnot. But in the fantasy world, you can have sections of your world that are unburdened by that view, not necessarily to where they act in spite of that view, where they say, no, we shall defy nature itself and, go all Dr. Frankenstein on us. But you could have, one of the examples that I sort of personally came up with was that of a folk religion, of a certain subset of worshippers who live outside of culture as a whole, who view death as being just a portion of existence that someone can reverse or otherwise come back from. And we already, in D&D itself, have mechanisms by which you can resurrect characters. Like, there is a literal resurrection spell where you can reunite the soul with the body after death, and they can continue on living. Yet we don't consider that to be against, as I was saying, that moral fabric of the universe. Because obviously you're a player character, you're a hero in this story. You don't want to die too soon. That's a big issue that I've sort of heard raised a lot. That you don't want a character to die before their story is finished. So if we can sort of ratchet back our opinions concerning that and say, well, yeah, I guess a true resurrection is perfectly fine, then I think that these forms of necromancy can then sort of step in and say, well, technically what we're doing is, according to our structures, to our beliefs, to our view and conception of death, is merely a continuation of life. It is not a bastardization of death, as the Raven Queen or other lawful entities might see. It is a way for us to still find use even after death. One of the most, I would say nuanced, but at least one of the most well-handled versions of this would be the Golgari clan from the Ravnican plane, which was put out in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Death, in their view, is simply an opportunity. And so by having this sort of, by having this sort of dual view of saying that life must die, but death not need be the end, like having that extra sentence doesn't necessarily make a character, in my estimation, evil. It is what they do with that personal belief that further, like, solidifies them as rampant, wannabe lich, or actual, like, not useful, but actual good character, like good in terms of alignment, not in terms of writing or role playing or anything else.
Oh, understood.
So,
I definitely approve of the idea of recontextualizing what the dead mean to a culture. I like the idea. It was brought up in chat a little bit, but kind of riffing on if there are other sensibilities that are like this, but this sort of reminds me a little bit of almost like ancient Egypt, the idea of guardians, ancestral guardians being a part of that undeath, that you might have left this world, but you're still responsible for protecting your progeny and your descendants. So you could very well have situations of, that's your business is sort of always unfinished. Your task when you were protected in life by your ancestors, and therefore you take that mantle when you pass on.
Right. Well, and even in D&D, there are subclasses that draw upon the spirits of the dead in order to fuel their own power, like the Path of the Spirit Barbarians, I think is.
Yeah, Logan literally just put it in chat. The path of
that these ancestral spirits surround you in your rage and anguish and can assist you in battle actively. Like, there's no need to have death in any particular RPG setting be a final touchstone for any character. There are ways to reverse it, unlike in real life. There are ways to continue life. There are ways to figure out avenues by which such sort of final conceptions can be circumvented.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things that we've talked about on the show before, the idea that it's cathartic to have a safe space where death is not to quote the Mummy, but death is only the beginning. Right. But I really dig that. And on the same vein of that, it just occurred to me that I had come up with this whole idea of reflavoring a necromancer as a sort of like a reverse Valkyrie.
Yeah.
That it's not you might usher the dead, the warrior dead to Valhalla, but at the same time they might still be itching for a fight, and when they get called on, they're like, hell yeah, bring me out, man. And so you raise the dead, but you're raising them in maybe more of a spirit form rather than a zombie form. So right. Your DM might let you reflavor them as being ghosts rather than being right. zombies, or they're zombies in everything but literal flavor. You just say, we're just gonna hand wave and say they're ghosts, but they have the stats.
Right.
If the corpse part is what the squeaky part for people is, you can very easily just turn that into a spirits or ghost spectral dead rather than
Right.
the corpse. You might maybe you need a body part as a component, but for the spell to raise
Right.
them, but you don't need the whole body.
Or you would need ash from a battlefield, like
Oh, that's a
funerary
good
pyre
one.
or
I like
something like
that.
that. Yeah. So
But the barbarian, that barbarian that does ancestral guardians is a really good example of a barbarian, a fighter that could use that sort of weird necromancy variant, where that's what's happening.
Yeah, where that necromantic influence doesn't necessarily define the character as evil, but still allows for a sort of exploration into the topics of, like, well, is this an evil act? Is this okay, like, by society standards? Is this okay by their cultural standards? Like, where do we draw the line?
Yeah, weirdly, it always comes back to consent for me. One way to fix the evilness, the quote-unquote evilness of necromancy, is to get the consent of the dead you're raising. So if you have an ability to commune with spirits, or it's sort of just, like I said, with the Valkyrie example, the people that are warriors, your culture is just, no, I want to come back. I always want to scrap. If there's a chance for me to come down and help a descendant, heck yeah, bring me back. Get me back in the fight. So they're almost like itching to come back, which is like a neat flavor of that. I could definitely see, instead of in an afterlife setting where it's like, yeah, you're partying all the time in Valhalla, but you're not at rest. You're gonna forever want to come back to the battle.
Yeah, chomping at the bit just for another chance. So yeah. I think there are many avenues that this particular discussion can go down, and the more that you explore, I think the better. So
heck yeah. The only other idea that I had regarding like world building with what the undead feel like, again, it plays into consent a little bit, that maybe you create an afterlife mythology that is, everybody who dies ends up in this big pot of just one place. They go to like an Elysium field sort of place. It's neutral, it's pleasant, but it's just sort of the same. It's a place of rest.
Sure.
But maybe the domains of the different gods have different like perks for wanting to go there. It's like people going to Universal Studios versus Disney World. They want different things when they want to go there.
Right.
But in order to get to those places, you either need to have been a follower of that god, like an active worshiper who abided by the tenets of that god to, get in good. Or you need to prove yourself. So maybe one of the things you do is you come back to the mortal plane to basically kind of do afterlife community service, where you're acting in accordance with the needs of the followers of that god. So you come back as a spirit, or you come back as a undead corpse or a zombie, and you're doing things in service of that god. So either you're a foot soldier for somebody, or you're shelving books at the arcane eternal library, or like any number of things that you're basically paying off your service. I don't want it to feel like indentured servitude. You're actively choosing to do this. Right. You're saying, I'm trying to ascend. And if I can do some good in the mortal world, I can then ascend to an even better place than where I was when I passed.
Right.
So I like that idea of maybe just having it be like I said, a karmic community service.
Yeah, I think
to get some extra credit.
Yeah, I think that definitely tracks with a lot of creative solutions to this problem. So yeah.
Ooh, Logan just said, how about a religion where if you aren't raised, you can never make it to heaven? Where the raising of the dead is a requirement to find peace. You
have to chew on that one.
Yeah, I'm curious about that though. I'd want to tease that out into like a semblance of lot. Yeah, I'm gonna think about that, Logan. That's really neat.
Yeah, that one's gonna have to be digested pretty thoroughly. Yeah. It's pretty good.
All right, let's move on. That was really good. I very much enjoyed that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the Lightborn. The Lightborn. Yeah. Let me put the link to the DMs Guild thing.
Sure. Okay.
That should be the DMs Guild link. So the Lightborn.
Yes.
By Mark Humes, which you might recognize as a figurehead in a number of places. So the Lightborn is a race that specifically in the document it talks about the idea that they're human, but they are born from an intersection of humanity and like positive energy from celestial forces. They are let's see some of the things that they talk about. They're basically constructed to be a champion, a heroic race of people. They're because of their origins in light and celestial magic and heavens, they have sort of an intrinsic life and energy to them that drives them to want to do good acts, drives them to want to be heroes and protectors. Let's see, it talks about that you know they live loud and raucously, like they are fully embracing of life. Let's see, what else do they talk about a little bit? They do a premise. They do have a little bit of a world building question of why only humanity? Why are they only human shaped? I don't know necessarily that there's any reason to limit yourself to just being human.
Yeah, even within the actual considerations, it's basically like just because there haven't been any examples that have been non-human doesn't mean they're not out there. In my mind, it's sort of like there have been no female witchers canonically within that universe.
Yeah,
but when you play the RPG, those can just be rumors. Those can just be sort of considerations that you take. So.
So the basic premise of the Lightborn, though, is that you're persuasive. You're this beacon of light and hope. You have obviously you've got some cleric-y natural spellcasting abilities. You can cast light and heroism. Right. It has you have a similar to the half-orc. You have if you drop to 0 hit points but aren't killed outright, you get popped back up to 1. So this idea of it's called hope never dies. Sure. And let's see. In addition, if you have not yet cast heroism as part of your natural abilities, you may use your reaction to immediately cast heroism at a range of 30 feet instead of touch. When this ability occurs, the Lightborn's hair glows brightly, casting light in a 10-foot radius. This effect ends after a minute. So this idea, it's got flavors of the ASMR.
Yes, definitely.
It just, you're missing a little bit of the like sort of angelic vibe. I almost would think in the hierarchy it would go like a celestial, an ASMR, and then a Lightborn in terms of like it's like a minor ASMR.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of get that vibe as well.
Yeah, I don't know if this came before or after the ASMR got put into like D&D Beyond as like accessible. I think it's a fun little flavor. It doesn't seem to do a ton to disrupt any existing races. So I guess on principle, I wouldn't really mind if somebody wanted to play this.
Sure.
It seems like a fun thing that you could build into your world. One of the things I really like here is the idea that Lightborn mature as humans do, but they remain spry and energetic well into old age. So like you'd have like a very youthful, very old person, but it wouldn't really affect how they behave. I like this idea of building a race that for whatever reason are just so infused with life that they never like the light never dims.
Right.
I guess.
That there is vigor perpetually within this individual.
I would even go so far as to say that rather than making it a straight up race, I think you could justify like a Lightborn culture. Or an ancestry that is not just a race. You could have an entire region or a community of people that believe themselves to be descendant from some sort of celestial influence.
Sure.
So the positive energy seeping into the world from the celestial planes,
Right.
that you just have anybody from this community has those little things where, you know, the elderly are incredibly youthful despite this. You could have them have those little light cantrips, or just little things about this. I would pepper into an existing community, I would think.
Probably.
That's where I would probably lean towards. But yes, this very much feels like a variant of an ASMR, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, not at all. I think it's very well put together. I think that the art, especially on the front, was done gorgeously by Kit Buss, and the whole structure of it lends itself to a very polished and very interesting alternative for ASMR in terms of, like, as you were sort of indicating, that sort of tiered structure of, like, Lightborn, ASMR.
It's a lesser ASMR.
yeah, and not to say that it's any less important, but that there are different abilities and different influences that you can exert upon a Lightborn character. So yeah, I think overall, you know, pretty good. If you want to use it, definitely check it out. And if you think you can reflavor it however you wish, go ahead.
Heck yeah. And so yeah, check it out on DMs Guild. If you want to support Mark, you can pay what you want for the Lightborn race. So highly recommend dropping a tip in the bucket if you so desire and you really like how this came out.
Yeah.
All right, so we got 2 more, and we got about 20 minutes. Let's go. Let's do it. All right, so tools of the trade, or RPG toolbox. We're going to talk a little bit about. I asked you when we were planning this episode what sort of programs, or whether it's organizational or planning tools, what sort of stuff do you go to when you're planning a game? Oh my God, Logan just called them less-amars. God damn it. Oh, yeah, is right. Anyway, RPG Toolbox. And you had name dropped Google Docs as, like, basically can't live without.
Yeah, well, as I was sort of telling you when we were generating this actual discussion, I am not that savvy when it comes to the suite of programs that I use. I've only recently got into Fantasy Grounds, World Anvil, and all these other sorts of programs where you can, like, have notes readily available and well constructed and sort of organized. And so, with my passing familiarity with Microsoft Office Word, I found myself comfortably using, more often than not, Office analog programs, most notably Google Docs, because to me, access and versatility takes precedence in almost every case. So being able to pull it up on my phone, being able to put it on a tablet, being able to have it on my computer screen at any given point in time, to be able to share with my players or with my collaborators, and be able to get their input, to have my own input, and have that communicated almost instantaneously. That is, to me, one of, if not the most pertinent concerns whenever you're dealing with any creative endeavor, in my view, but especially when you have a tabletop game going on, because improv is very much a portion of the experience. And to be able to sort of jot down ideas that even just pass by briefly, or to modify a sentence that you've been trying to sort of chew on for a very long time, and finally get down the wording as you desire it at any point in time, whether you're on the bus or at, you know, at a public space, or, you know, just sitting on your couch, just mulling it over in the back of your head. Like, having that inspiration strike you and then being able to act upon it, Google Docs and all that really allow me personally, and I think a wider array of people more generally, the ability to just get it out of their head and onto paper. And with it being a completely free tool that's just given, especially with any Google account, like there's no excuse to my mind not to at least have use of it, even if it is passing, even if it is supportive in relation to World Anvil or any of the other programs that you actually more would use whenever you're actively devoting your energies to it. Because if it's not too much to have it on your phone, then, it shouldn't be too much to jot down a few sentences or jot down a few character ideas or what have you, and then carry those over into your preferred program. So,
I have found it hard to disengage from Google Drive completely because, there's certain things that it just does the best. I really like collaborative editing on it, all sorts of stuff like that. One alternative, depending on the way that you like organizing information for campaigns, and if you have it, if you happen to have the Microsoft Office suite, which it's pretty ubiquitous at this point,
sure.
I really got into OneNote for a long time. OneNote does a really, really good job of creating a notebook style of organization where you basically have, like in Chrome, you've got tabs, but under each tab there are subtabs. So you can have, when I was running campaigns, I'd have a whole OneNote notebook devoted to a particular campaign, and I could have all of my NPCs listed in one section, all my locations in another, all of my encounters that I had planned were all in a different tab, but it was all very condensed, easy to access. And more importantly, I'm pretty sure somebody put the SRD into a OneNote notebook that OneNote also has internal links that you can set up. So you can link to different pages in your notebook. But the SRD example is that exact thing, that they have everything that was in the SRD got put into a notebook. You could look up rules, you could search for things, and you could search the entire notebook for that information. So it was nice to have it all in one place. Whereas in Google, they do have a bit of search functionality in Google Docs, but it's not as substantially that internal search was really good in OneNote. I liked it a lot. It's just a different way of visualizing information rather than having a folder full of documents. It felt like it was one document. It was just a substantial document that had all my stuff in it. And you could flip between notebooks pretty easy. So I was a big fan of OneNote. I've since stopped using it just because of a lot of my D&D stuff tends to be online now. So having something that I could collaborate or share with someone was a lot easier. I know Office has online versions of OneNote and things now, so you can upload and back up things and share them, which is nice. It's catching up, but OneNote for me felt a lot more useful in person because I could just have my laptop and my entire notebook was there, and it felt like I was going through a notebook. So that was a good transition for me.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I mean, obviously you guys have your own opinions of what things were going to be useful for you as a DM.
Of course.
I had forgotten to mention this, and I should have during our break, that we are still planning our giveaway from Die Hard Dice. I feel ashamed that I didn't talk about it. That on March 6th, so this is the last episode before we announce the winner.
Oh, really?
On March 6th, we're going to be announcing you can be eligible for the contest by tweeting with the hashtag DiscoverRPG and just talk to us, give us questions, send us ideas, comment on something we've already talked about, give us stories about D&D. We even had fill in Discover RPG is and let your phone complete the sentence, and we'll see what happens. But and you have to follow us on Twitter, so at Discover RPG Show. So any follower that uses that hashtag between now and the last day of February, which is tomorrow, between now and tomorrow, will be eligible for a random draw. And when you win, if you win, you get a free set of Die Hard dice of your choice. So you can go, again, check out dieharddice.com and you will find cool dice. And that's free shipping, and you just pick a pair of dice, you pick a dice set. It's going to be pretty cool. But we will announce the winner on March 6th.
Okay.
So
sounds like an interesting plan. Sounds like a pretty fun shindig. Yeah.
But you can take the hashtag and tell us what kind of organizational tools you use as a DM.
Hey, yeah.
Give us more ideas.
Absolutely. It might be programs that we've never heard before, or you know, even the old standbys. It's good to have, you know, confirmation that we're not all just sort of all in our heads just thinking that we've got the perfect way settled.
There's no perfect way.
No perfect way at all.
All right, so we started around 15 past, so I'm going to give us 15 minutes.
Okay.
We'll do our final subject. Our last topic was, let's see, what year is it? Talking about...
It's Robin Williams.
Yep.
That good old Robin Williams impression.
Yeah, it's real good. Talking about calendars and timekeeping in your games. My best example right now is maybe the most extreme example. In Countless Heroes, we have a calendar that I personally love, 28-day month calendars. Way easier to track. There's no reason why your fantasy world can't have a very pretty, balanced calendar just for your own sanity.
Sure.
You could also just say it's the exact same calendar as we do, and you just say it's April. Whatever the draconic word for April is, it is.
Whatever the draconic word for April is.
It's entirely up to you whether you want to take that extra step and make a time. Not every campaign is long enough that it justifies having the year planned out. You might just play one-shots, and it doesn't really matter. But you might find that you want to track time and date, or just generally. You don't have to be super specific if you don't want to.
Absolutely.
But Countless Heroes calendar, Jay loves it. Thank you, Jay. I love that other people track it for me. So we have a 28-day calendar, or 28-day month.
Right.
And then I think 12 months. Then what happened was one of our players, Tessa, who really dug the calendar, because we basically play real time for the most part. We had a table, basically a spreadsheet that said, if it's today's real date, it's February 27th, then the day in the calendar is fictional month and this day. So that you could just look it up on the spreadsheet to find out what day it was. Very useful for me personally. I find it a little bit too abstracted. I'm airing dirty laundry out. Sorry, Logan. Logan has reasons for why he likes having that, especially useful for when you're doing a real-time campaign. It's good to know how many days have actually passed and what time of year it is and that sort of thing. But what do you have any? Have you tracked the times of year and such in games that you've run before?
I have in certain games, usually within my own homebrew. I've set up a world where there are 4-month periods of seasons where it's like the frosted, the favored, and the frigid, the favored, and like another F word, but it's basically analogous to winter, fall, and spring, summer-ish. Okay. I don't keep it very stringently, because a lot of my campaigns have gone on a little bit shorter than I had anticipated for any myriad number of reasons. But even that little bit of world building has allowed me to sort of have a sort of creative pride in what I've actually sort of synthesized from my own mind, you know. Even if it is something as simple of, this is a 12-month period with 30 days in each month and, 7 days in the week, of which there are 5 or whatever. I can't math at the minute. But having that extra step where you actually look around to your world and say, okay, how exactly do I want to communicate that this sort of realm has its own conceptions around certain days that is different from ours, or has its own expressions based on the days. You can't be, thank God it's Friday if Friday doesn't exist.
Sure.
So
in the Countless Heroes calendar, we don't have days of the week, partly because it'd be a pain in the butt to have an additional abstraction. But because we have 28-day months, it doesn't matter. The first of the month is always going to be the first day of the week. You always know, like, if you just told somebody it's the 15th of Aruna, if you lived in that world, you would just know that the 15th is always a particular day of the week. So that simplifies it a little bit for us. I saw, and I can't for the life of me find it. I saw a celestial calendar, a month calendar that had my dog shaking his collar. But I saw a circumstance where they set up a celestial calendar that the months were called watches. That the idea was every month a certain constellation was dominant in the sky, and that was the holy guardian that was watching over the world during that time period. And so the months were all named after those constellations, because it was a way of connecting the celestial mechanics with how people culturally track time and how their mythology worked.
Right.
But I thought that was a beautiful way to do it, because it would be like, it'd be the watch of the fairy or the watch of the minotaur, like whatever the symbol was, and that was what the month was. I really enjoyed that.
And additionally, it's interesting that you mentioned celestial mechanics, because you can have it to be where, as I have in my campaign, like the stars change color certain times of the year, the moons are out of sync, or something happens.
I love multiple moons. I love multiple moons.
That's a favorite of mine. I actually wrote it out to where during certain parts of the month, one moon, which is significantly smaller than the other, would cover up a hole in the larger moon, like so perfectly that they sort of move in sync and like rise and set at the same time. And then at some point, the larger moon asynchronously sort of went on ahead of the smaller. But yeah, I think that there are so many interesting mechanics that you can introduce to convey not only the time of month or what that means within the game itself, but the cultures which surround it, the mystical attitudes that kind of come associated with it. Like, there are so many interesting paths to sort of map out. And yeah, I think that it's an often overlooked mechanic, because it's very easy, and I'm guilty of that, to just say, oh, it's May, but not like.
Well, and it like you said, it depends on if the system of timekeeping has some importance to the story you're trying to tell. If it doesn't, that's one less thing to worry about. If it doesn't matter what time of year it is, and that's not an element of your game, you don't have to plan that out. But use Game of Thrones as an example. Song of Ice and Fire. Winter lasts for decades sometimes. That's really intense and a really interesting plot point to world build with. I like the idea of maybe having multiple moons, and so you have conflicting moon god religions dealing in your culture, or in your world cultures. You can take, if you decide, well, let's do something interesting with our seasons or with our time, or something like a world where daylight is only, like, everyone has Alaska level daylight, where there's months where it's just complete darkness. Think
Alaska level daylight.
Yeah, well, just think about that idea, though, of the world being dark for months. That's terrifying. You have a world that's then suddenly overrun by monsters or like vampires or some shit.
Apologies to all Alaskan viewers.
I mean, in the sense of something at the top or the bottom of our current planet, that you would have a very uneven yearly cycle of light and darkness. But it happens everywhere. And what would that mean? But those are optional things, and if you're looking for an interesting hook for a world and you want to build from it, sometimes the like I said, the celestial mechanics or the way the world works from a very basic natural standpoint can be a very interesting jumping off point to come up with a cool storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely do ascribe to the idea that um, do not do not feel like you have to have the world contained just within the world itself. Like, look to the stars, look to the depths of the oceans, and like find inspiration for whatever campaign that you have or want to have in every strata of nature. Like, because excuse me, the mythologies in real life that surround our understanding of celestial bodies and our understanding of even the depths of the woods or the sea, like it's integral to our own sort of conceptions. So there's no reason why you couldn't take the time to have the cultures within your world play around with those ideas as well. Again, not to say that it's necessary, but that it's another layer that you as a DM can take to immerse your characters within this world, solidify their place, and just, you know, get some meat on the bones, basically, of this skeleton of a world that you construct.
I approve.
I approve as well. The motion passes. Aha.
All right, everybody. It is past our bedtime.
Yep.
Thank you all so much for joining us. And Jason, once again, I will never stop thanking you for hopping in and helping us out. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on again. I'm sure we will do it again at some point.
Happy to be here.
All right. Once more, please use the hashtag DiscoverRPG between now and tomorrow, and you will be eligible for a giveaway for a free set of Die Hard dice. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next week, and please do me a favor and be good to each other. All righty. Goodbye, all.
Bye-bye.